Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, so you handed us this stack of sources. Really radical stuff.
It's definitely out there.
Detailing this theory that just completely remaps human history, scripture, modern conflicts, all onto this idea of an ancient war between, well, what the sources call space aliens.
Yeah. So our mission today is really to give you the shortcut, to sort of unpack the core claims from this specific group of historical linguists.
They're looking at language origin stories, right, across the globe.
Exactly. Looking for patterns suggesting external intervention, space aliens as the material labels them.
And the central question, the big hook for me, is this paradox. Why do almost all major civilizations say, yeah, God's gave us language, gave us writing, but then you hit the Torah, the Bible, this huge complex, and apparently no origin story for its language.
It's the exception, and that's what this group jumps on.
So this deep dive is going to explore their theory, that this absence isn't an accident. It's deliberate, a massive historical cover-up, basically rooted in language.
Let's start with that global pattern then, because it does seem pretty consistent according to these linguists.
Okay, like Sanskrit.
Right. The sources point to Sanskrit's origin story. Very clear. Brahma, the creator god, he gifted language and writing to humans, handed it down.
And that's not unique.
Not at all. You see echoes, they argue, in Mesoamerica. The Incas, the Mayas, their myths apparently say the same thing, the ability to use glyphs to write things down.
A gift from the gods.
A gift from the gods. It's presented as conferred knowledge, not something humans just, figured out on their own.
But here's where it gets interesting. The sources claim this wasn't always a peaceful handover. There were fights.
Big fights. That's a really consistent thread they highlight. Internal conflict among these superior beings, gods, aliens, whatever you want to call them.
About whether humans should even get writing.
Exactly. The core argument was apparently giving human script was incredibly dangerous.
Dangerous.
Because writing allows you to reconstruct and recover your past systematically. If humans could do that, understand their real history.
Then the control these beings had, based on keeping humans ignorant, would collapse.
Right. The gods would be, and this is a quote they pull, doomed. It was supposedly all about information control, a war over history itself.
So the pattern is, powerful beings give language, but often argue about giving writing because it empowers humans too much.
That seems to be the rule they've identified.
Which brings us back to the big exception, the Quranic biblical texts. No origin story for the language.
And for this group of linguists, that lack of an origin story isn't just missing data, it's the clue. It points, they argue, to deliberate linguistic camouflage. Something is being hidden.
Okay, so how do they support that? What's the linguistic evidence?
This is where it gets quite technical, focusing on the original Torah text.
Right.
The claim, and it's a big one, is that there's no mention of God in any form of that word as we think of it. Not in the original.
No God. What's there instead?
The terms used are El, just the letter, or sound, El and Elohim, which is simply the plural of El.
Okay, but Elohim is usually translated as God, using a plural form for majesty. Like royalty might say, we.
Traditionally, yes. But this group argues that's a mistranslation. They say the context, the actions described around Elohim, points to a group, a collective.
Not a singular majestic being, but multiple entities.
Multiple entities. Specifically, they conclude Elohim refers to a group of these space aliens, the El faction.
How do they justify that leap? Plural of majesty is a standard linguistic thing.
They argue the narratives describe collective actions, physical limitations, technology use, things inconsistent with an omnipotent single deity, but very consistent with a group of advanced beings.
So reading between the lines of the actions described.
Exactly. And they stress you need to look at very literal translations. They mention things like the Naked Bible attempts at word-for-word rendering. Because they claim many common translations, especially the Old Testament, were deliberately badly translated. Specifically to obscure this original meaning of El and Elohim, to hide the alien aspect.
Wow. Deliberate mistranslation on that scale.
It's a core part of the theory. And this linguistic revisionism, they claim, extends beyond just the word for God.
Like what else?
Take Pharaoh, central to the Exodus story.
Absolutely. Leader of Egypt.
Well, this linguistic group claims Pharaoh isn't an Egyptian word or title at all.
What? Then what is it?
They argue it's a phonetic transliteration, basically spelling out the sound of an Essene word.
Essene. The Dead Sea Scrolls people.
That group, the 12 tribes, And among them, the word pharaoh or something sounding like it simply meant tribal leader.
Hold on. So if the text uses an Essene word for tribal leader,
The implication is staggering, isn't it? It suggests the story isn't set in Egypt with the Egyptian kings.
it's said among the Essenes themselves, describing their own tribal leaders.
That's the argument. They say the Egyptians referred to the Valley of the Kings. They didn't use pharaoh like that. So, using pharaoh pins the narrative to the Essenes, not Egypt.
Which completely reframes the traditional Exodus narrative.
Utterly. If these linguistic claims hold any water, it means we need a reason for such a massive historical rewrite. Why camouflage the Essenes story as an Egyptian one?
Which brings us to the next part of the sources, the physical events, the war.
Exactly. The why behind the alleged linguistic camouflage. This theory posits a massive physical event, an expeditionary force landing on Earth.
And then sources give numbers.
They estimate around 250,000 individuals, a huge number.
250,000 non-humans. Landing where?
Two main spots, according to the sources. The Hindu Kush region in India and western China. Apparently, they split the force for safety.
Okay.
In India, this group became known as the Davas.
Davas, like Devas in Hinduism.
Yeah.
Meaning gods or divine beings.
Precisely. And this is the group credited in the theory with gifting Sanskrit and teaching humans how to build Vimane.
Vaimanas. The flying machines from Hindu texts. Described here as stone spaceships.
Stone spaceships that fly, yes. That's the claim tied to the Davas. But this landing wasn't peaceful, not internally.
Right, the conflict you mentioned earlier.
Extreme conflict. The sources go so far as to speculate that the sheer scale of the weaponry used in the fighting between these alien factions is what created the majority of the Sahara Desert. Environmental devastation from alien warfare.
That's a massive claim. So who were they fighting?
This brings in the second key faction, the El group. Remember El and Elohim from the Torah linguistics?
Right, the ones who were supposedly not God, but a group.
That's them. According to this theory, they were a separate, maybe dissident faction. They landed separately.
Where did the El group land?
They apparently conquered the Khazarians first, the historical Turkic people north of the Black Sea in what's now Ukraine.
So El conquered the Khazarians. The Davas landed in India, China. Then what?
Then, inevitably, the El and the Davas, the main force, clashed. Big time.
A war between the alien faction.
A decisive one. The sources point to hints in texts like the Zohar suggesting the El faction got hammered, lost half their people apparently. A major defeat.
So the El group lost the war.
Decisively beaten, which led to a desperate, hasty retreat. The Davas, the winners, they apparently left the planet later on. Maybe too much radiation from the war they created. That's speculation in the sources.
Okay, so the El faction is defeated and retreating. This is crucial, isn't it?
Absolutely crucial. This defeat is the catalyst for everything that follows in the theory, especially regarding the Essenes and the Torah.
Where did the defeated El faction retreat to?
They fled the battle site. The sources mention plasma drive jets, advanced tech, and went south. Way south.
And landed.
In the south of Yemen, precisely where the 12 tribes of the Essenes were living.
The Essenes again. The group whose word for tribal leader was supposedly Pharaoh.
The very same.
Yeah.
And the conquest, according to the sources, was incredibly fast, like about 20 minutes. The El, even defeated, were technologically overwhelming.
So the El aliens conquered the Essenes in Yemen? Then what?
Then came a forced march. The El compelled the Essenes to move north, up along the Red Sea, towards Judea.
A forced march.
Yeah.
Up the Red Sea.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
The Exodus.
That's the claim. This historical event, the El conquering the Essenes and forcing them north, is the original event that got recorded.
And the Torah narrative then is?
A badly translated version of that story. The story of the Essenes' conquest and forced relocation by the El aliens. That's the core assertion.
But who did the translating? Or the mistranslating? And why?
Now we connect back to the other group conquered by the Khazarians.
Right, the ones in Ukraine. They were conquered before the Essenes.
Correct. The theory posits that centuries later, around 1280 AD, the Khazarians encountered the Essene texts.
Nice.
They recognized the descriptions. They realized the Elohim or El in the Essene stories were the same beings who had conquered them.
So they saw a shared history of being conquered by the El.
Exactly, and they decided to essentially merge the narratives. They supposedly revised the Essene texts, the basis of the Torah, to insert themselves into the story.
Why would they do that?
To tie their lineage to the Essenes who had this ancient scripture. By rewriting the Essene story and making it their own foundational myth, they could claim that historical and religious legitimacy.
So the sources claim the Khazarians performed this revision around 1280 AD?
Yes. And they make some really specific, controversial historical claims stemming from this, such as Jews, meaning the Khazarian descendants who adopted this revised narrative, were not actually in Palestine or part of that biblical landscape until after 1280 AD.
That contradicts basically all standard history.
Completely. And also the claim that the Judeans, the original Essenes in the story, were never slaves of an Egyptian pharaoh. That entire slavery in Egypt narrative, a result of the Khazarian mistranslation and historical fusion.
Okay, this is where the theory moves into extremely sensitive territory, linking linguistic claims to modern identities and conflicts.
It does, and we need to be crystal clear. We are relaying the claims from the source material. We are not endorsing the conclusions, especially the highly charged ones that follow.
Understood. So what is the connection made in the sources between this Khazarian revision and, say, modern Zionism?
The sources claim that within this Khazarian group, particularly a small royal or elite core, there's a specific, deeply held belief system that originated from their interaction with the El conquerors.
A belief system about themselves.
Yes. They allegedly believe that the El faction genetically modified them.
Genetically modified? How? Why?
To be superior humans. The sources use this really strange, jarring term, the dongle, to refer to the supposed extra bit of DNA or genetic marker gifted by the El aliens.
The genetic marker of superiority given by aliens.
That's the alleged belief, and according to these sources, this belief is the actual engine behind Zionism. It fuels the idea that this specific group is fundamentally different, superior, and destined to rule. And that non-Jews, the sources use the term goyim, or goy, are consequently viewed as lesser. Cattle, or beasts, is the language used in the source material to describe this alleged belief.
So a claim of ancient alien genetic tampering is presented as the root of a modern political ideology and religious supremacism.
That is the explicit argument laid out in these documents. It ties back directly to the El aliens' primary method of control, psychological warfare. The El were supposedly masters of it. How else could a relatively small group control thousands of conquered people like the Essenes or Khazarians without constant rebellion?
They needed mental control, not just physical force.
Exactly. Instill a belief system, a psychological framework that ensures compliance or even worship.
And the Khazarians, having been subjected to this by the El,
they absorbed the techniques, they learned the playbook of psychological manipulation from their conquerors, according to this theory.
And then used themselves.
The sources allege they perfected it and used it later. The claim is they managed to conquer Palestine by virtue of psychological warfare, by convincing the world of historical and religious claims that, according to this theory, weren't actually theirs.
And the sources extend this to modern day.
Yes. They explicitly state that this inherited mastery of psychological manipulation is used to create modern social and political divisions. Cults is the word used, like climate cult, trans cult, to maintain control and division. Again, highly charged claims from the sources.
It's a picture of history being driven by layers of psychological manipulation originating from an alien encounter.
And this core Khazarian group, the one allegedly believing in the dongle, they are supposedly operating under intense pressure right now.
Pressure from what?
From their own belief system.
Okay.
Specifically, the belief that their alien modifiers are coming back.
The second coming. But applied to the aliens.
That's how the sources frame it. A return of the gods who uplifted them.
Where does that belief come from?
The theory suggests it stems from massive abandonment issues. Remember, the El were routed by the Davas and fled.
Right. They retreated hastily from the battle.
Imagine them leaving their conquered subjects, the Khazarians, maybe shouting something like, "Don't worry, we'll be back." A desperate promise in retreat.
Leaving the Khazarians waiting for centuries.
Exactly. With this deeply ingrained belief they were special, chosen by the El, but then the El just left. This created supposedly a profound sense of abandonment coupled with fervent expectation.
And they think the return is soon.
The sources report that this group anticipates the return around the year 2050. That's the time frame they're allegedly working towards.
Okay, let's circle back to language one last time because it started all this. Hebrew, the language of the Essenes, the Torah.
Right, the outlier. The language with no divine origin story in its own texts.
How does this theory finally explain that anomaly?
It's actually perfectly logical within their framework. Hebrew script and language have no origin story because the Essenes were already speaking and writing it before the El aliens ever landed.
So it wasn't a gift from the aliens. It predates them.
Precisely. It was a naturally evolved human language, already ancient by the time the El arrived. It wasn't given by the alien gods, so no story was needed.
Is there any evidence cited for this pre-El existence of Hebrew?
The sources mention inscriptions found in the Americas, North and South America, carved into rocks.
Inscriptions in what language?
They call it First Tongue or Proto-Hebrew. They claim these inscriptions are evidence of this ancient, widespread language that the Essenes spoke, proving it wasn't an alien import from the Middle East campaign.
An ancient global Proto-Hebrew. Quite a claim.
It contrasts sharply with another language discussed in the sources, Yiddish.
How so?
Yiddish, they argue, is completely different. It's flagged as a made-up language, relatively speaking, created in the 1300s.
Made up why?
As a political expediency. Apparently, the Russian authorities demanded the Khazarians adopt a formal religion and have scriptures.
So they needed a written language quickly.
Yes. And they essentially took the German Teutonic language spoken in the area and transliterated it, wrote it down using Hebrew script. That mix became Yiddish.
So Yiddish has a known, recent human origin under specific historical pressures.
Correct. Unlike the Essenes Proto-Hebrew, which this theory claims is ancient, and predates the entire alien intervention narrative.
Wow. Okay. We've basically synthesized this incredibly intricate theory that tries to connect global myths, the Bible, the Torah, linguistic anomalies, ancient wars, alien factions, genetic modifications, psychological warfare, and modern geopolitics into one single sprawling narrative.
It is quite a construction, a complete remapping, as you said, tying threads from ancient India to modern conflicts, all back to this alleged extraterrestrial intervention and the fight over information.
It certainly makes you think differently about the foundations of historical narratives.
Absolutely. And that brings us to our final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. If we take the core premise from these sources seriously for just a moment, that the ability to write, to reconstruct the past, was the one thing the gods or aliens truly feared humans possessing.
Because it would undo their control.
Precisely. Then the question becomes, what crucial aspects of our real history might still be actively obscured or manipulated today, perhaps through the very subtle filters of translation and interpretation?
How much of what we think we know about ancient history, about scripture, is based purely on translations that might carry an agenda?
Exactly. What assumptions are we making based on words that might not mean what we think they mean? And if we could somehow access the original first tongue, as these sources call it, how might that fundamentally change our understanding of world events, past and present?
Something definitely to think about. It challenges you to look beyond the accepted translations.
Beyond the surface narrative. What lies underneath the words? That's the lingering question.